You're listening to How to 20-something, the only podcast that helps both men and women navigate their 20s and learn how to adult across all aspects of their lives. We're going to be focusing on career, relationships, finances, fitness, nutrition, and all of the common challenges and obstacles a typical 20-something will face in this post-college life and what to do about it. I'm your host, Jess Diamond, and I am the CEO and founder of Jess Diamond Coaching, where I help young professionals get their shit together, gain their confidence, and own their life. No one prepares you for this adulting world, so allow me to help you feel like you are no longer a chicken running around with its head cut off, and that you actually know what the hell is going on and what your next step to take is. Welcome to How to 20-something. Welcome back to another episode of How to 20-something, where today's episode opens the door to financial planning and why this is not something to push off until you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. I've brought on a friend of mine to help you get started with your finances so you can let your money work for you instead of constantly having to put in every cent to your own accounts. I've personally always been dialed into my finances, call it the Jew in me, but I have always known exactly how much I'm spending and how much I'm bringing in on a month-to-month basis, and it helps me plan ahead, like with trips or with my Roth IRA or high-yield savings account. And if you don't know what some of these things are or how they work, then keep listening, as this is some of what we're going to be talking about today. But you cannot survive in today's world without knowledge around where your money is going, and that's why I've brought on Justin to help break it all down for you. I met Justin as students at the University of Florida, go Gators. Justin is a dynamic, passionate individual who turned his personal grief story into a mission to help others in all facets of his life. Professionally, Justin services as a private wealth advisor and family financial coach. Justin primarily works with young, growing families, wealth inheritance transitions, and entrepreneurially minded professionals. Using a sports analogy, if you're the owner of your team, your family, Justin acts as the head coach who works with you and your family to develop and implement the right game plan for you to achieve financial success, however you may define it. Personally, Justin was born and raised in Boca Raton, Florida, and just moved from New York City back to Boca. Outside of trying new restaurants and going to sporting events, Justin spends his free time giving back to the community with Experience Camps, a nonprofit organization that sends kids who have lost a parent, sibling, or primary caregiver to a 1-week free overnight camp. A true camp counselor at heart, every year, Justin leads a week-long program for 100-plus campers and 50-plus volunteers, transforming the lives of grieving children through compassion, connection, and play. It's truly the best week of the year. And for those of you who don't know, which is probably most of you listening, I will be joining Justin at Experience Camps this year. But back to you, Justin. I am so excited to welcome you to How to 20-something.
Wow, what an intro. I definitely didn't write that. That's an incredibly long intro that is not worthwhile for me, but I appreciate it nonetheless, and I'm ecstatic to be here. Been looking forward to this all week, Jess.
Super sarcastic. I love it. Starting off strong. You did write it, and I was just happy to present you to my audience. But Justin, you don't know this. The episode that comes out right before yours is all about my story and how it shaped me into who I am today and the work that I do with 20-somethings. So I want to start with your mission behind why you got into this line of work and how your story has evolved you into being a fantastic resource to the people listening.
Yeah, I love it. Let's start getting vulnerable here. So, like Jess said, I grew up in Boca Raton, Florida. Money was kind of talked about at the dinner table. My 10th birthday, my grandpa and my dad were debating the difference between an IRA, traditional IRA and a Roth IRA. But that's not really where my focus was. I was a sports nut, as you could see if you're watching this in the background, my D-Wade jersey over here, Florida Gator helmet over here. I love sports, love playing it, love bringing people together. My mom thought I was going to be Chris Berman on ESPN. My dad thought I was going to be the defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. And I majored in sport management at UF, was very involved in intramural sports and all of that. Probably met Jess in the gym for the first time when she was out squatting me. And unfortunately, the summer going into my senior year, I was interning with the Brooklyn Nets, and I got a call that no kid ever wanted to get. My dad had passed away suddenly from a heart attack. And that moment I remember incredibly vividly. And every moment after that, I knew my life would never be the same. And so people don't prepare you for what happens when people die around you. And they don't prepare you for all the things that come after that. Right. And so what happened was we kind of gathered as a family, flew back, we had the funeral, and there were things like death certificates, and we were searching for the will, and we had to meet with an estate attorney and planned like the burial and kind of finagle all the financial issues during the hardest time of our lives. We had just lost one of the most important people in my family, my personal role model, the person who motivates me in everything that I do. And our life was completely upended, and nobody really knew how to handle that situation, including myself. And wills, estates, probate, none of that was ever mentioned in school. And I volunteered to be the executor of my dad's estate, and I didn't even know what an executor was. And this was all at 21 years old, going into my senior year at college, where I wanted to hang out with my friends and go to bars and go to Gator games and play sports and all of that. I kind of had to grow up into my 20 somethings pretty quick. And so my ultimate mission is, how do I make sure no other 21-year-old experiences something that I had to experience and go through it alone, right? People die. That's one of the facts of life. We're not getting away from that, but you shouldn't have to go through that alone with someone. And my goal is to just be there as someone who gets you during those tough transitions in life, and the good ones too.
Yeah, and it's hard because you don't really think about these things until you're caught in the crossfire of it, which is what happened to you, and it's what you want to help other people not have to try and figure out on their own. I think that's what most coaches do, is like, we became a resource based off of something that happened to us personally that we had to deal with all by ourselves, and we're like, that sucked to go through all alone, and we want to make sure you don't have to experience that, because we already did. We did that for you, and we paved this way, this roadmap for you to follow as a result. What would you say was the biggest lesson you had to learn through that experience of becoming an executive estate owner, or having to figure out the finances for your family, like for your mom, for your siblings, and really just have to take on that bigger role at such a young age when you were still trying to enjoy life and the end of your college experience as well?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? The executor of an estate is, you have to get really organized really quick, but it's more like life throws you curveballs and you never know when it's going to happen. So value the time that you have with the people that you love and do the things that you want to do with those people. It was more on the emotional side, and then the technical side I've been learning ever since, right? It was the toughest time of my life, but I learned a lot about myself, whereas like, hey, I want the ball in my hands in the fourth quarter. I want to take charge. I want to take ownership of these situations because I trust myself. And I've learned, and I was going to say this a little later on, but I've learned that like, there's really no mistakes. There's just learning experiences. And so this whole thing ever since 2018, when my dad died, has been a learning experience. And that was like the catalyst of my 20 something. So that's why I think that's why you asked me to come on today. And that's why I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and I want to go on to the topic of today's actual episode, which is finances, so that my audience can take away some valuable information that you provide pretty regularly to your audience as well. And we all know that in today's economy, money is important. You cannot survive without money. You need it, but it's also not the end all be all. Why should someone in their 20s listen into this episode in particular when it comes to handling and learning about their own finances?
Yeah, there are thousands of resources out there. So this episode is going to be one of many. And it might be conflicting, it might not. Hopefully it aligns with some of the smart people that you're listening to. But if you're on TikTok and you're not listening to the Morgan Households of the world or whoever it might be, It might not. Anyway, money makes the world go round, and money is not exactly what you said, is not the end all be all, but it allows you, it enables you to do the things you love with the people that you love, whether that's having the freedom and flexibility to come volunteer at experience camps that you and I are both going to do, or take that trip, or go to Taylor Swift with your daughter. Like I have two clients that are going to Taylor Swift with their daughters. That, like, those tickets aren't cheap, but they value that experience. As a 20 something, money decisions that you make now are going to impact your life, family, and experiences down the road, whether you know that or not. And so the number one advantage that you have as a 20 something right now is time for growth, time to learn, and time to make mistakes. And like I said before, there's no mistakes, there's just learning experiences. When you graduate college, like, you're like, all right, life is great. And the only thing I can guarantee you, right, is life's going to throw you a curveball. And Jess, you know this better than most. I've listened to a lot of your episodes, and like, there's going to be something that goes wrong. The last thing you want is for your financial situation to hinder your ability to make decisions. And so if you make sure your financial house isn't always in order, that's the goal. Like, if you could take away one thing, is like, just make sure your financial house is in order. One of my sayings is, your health is your number one asset on the balance sheet. So your physical health, if you're not physically healthy, A, it's going to be expensive, but B, you can't work and you can't be there for the people that you love and do the things you want to do. Your mental and emotional health, if you're not all there mentally and emotionally, your mindset's not there, then other things will drag, and your financial health as well. So make sure your financial house is in order, and I can go on, but I'm sure we'll get to a lot more.
Can you break down what a financial house means? So if I were to confidently say my financial house is in order, what does that mean? Or how do you help your clients see that for themselves?
I was having this conversation with a friend yesterday about the difference between financial advisors, financial planners, and financial coaches. And I think, and I'm a certified financial planner, so the financial planner in me is kind of that overarching 30,000 foot view of everything that goes on in your financial situation, including not just like your savings and investments and making sure you're maximizing returns, but what, like, insurance, if you need it, what does that look like, right? How is that affected? Your retirement plan, retirement benefits, those options, Social Security, everything across the board. And the things that most 20 somethings don't think about is your estate plan. And as a 20 something, like, you're like, oh, I'm not going to die. Like, nothing bad is going to happen to me. But that unfortunately isn't the real world. And I've had friends who have gotten hit by a car and were in the hospital and unresponsive. And what happens if you don't have the right documents in place, and one of the doctors, like, all right, we should pull the plug, and your parents or the person that you want to make the decision doesn't want to, right? There are all those different things, documents, estate documents, living wills, and stuff like that. That's part of your financial house. The beneficiaries on your accounts, like, you want to make sure if something were to happen to you, that your money is going to the right place, or it's benefiting the people that you want, or the causes that you want. And you want to do that now, because as a 20 something, life's only getting busier. There's only going to be more and more people that are going to be relying on you. And if you do it now, if you set the foundation now, you're only going to learn and grow over time.
Is it true that if you don't have any beneficiary on your accounts, like, let's say your savings and your checkings account, like I have Wells Fargo, Chase, we've got Citibank, like all those different, your actual bank accounts, that it just goes to the government, and your money, your family doesn't see that money, or whoever you mark down for who you would want that money to go to doesn't see it. It just goes into the government. Is that correct?
That's not actually
correct. Good.
No.
I'm learning something.
Yeah. Not actually correct, but what it does go, like, based on the size and the amount of the quantity, like the value of your account. So let's say you have $100,000 checking account at Wells Fargo, Bank of America, or something like that, and you don't have a beneficiary on there. Well, that means, and you don't have a will. That would mean you die intestate, which is what happened to my dad. My dad died without a will. And so we had to go to the courts and petition the courts to gain access to his accounts, financial passwords, all of that. And that's a process and a cumbersome process, especially most estates are kind of opened and closed within a 6 to 12 month period, mostly average around 9 months. The first 9 months after someone dies is the last thing you want to do is be going to a Wells Fargo or a Bank of America dealing with their customer service team and presenting a death certificate saying, hey, the most important person in my life just died. I need access to their money because I need to pay my college tuition, or we have to transfer the payment on their car to somebody else, or I need to make the payment on the car and I don't know how to access their accounts, right? All those things, those like little details that you don't think about, they come up, and the older you get, the more convoluted it is. So my mission is to help the 20 somethings set that right foundation so that they don't have to worry later on.
And how would someone go about adding a beneficiary to their account to minimize that possibility of happening, of having to go through the struggles of your family having to deal with your money or like trying to access your money?
Sure. So there are a couple different types of accounts. So non-qualified accounts are like taxable accounts or checking and savings accounts. So you have a checking or savings account at the bank. You can add a beneficiary by doing a transfer on death beneficiary or a payable upon death beneficiary. I would also, like, one-off situations, it depends on, like, this is general. And so I would come to either myself, who's a professional, or an estate attorney to understand what makes the most sense in your specific situation. But these are different types of ways to add beneficiaries. So those are non-qualified accounts, taxable investments, checking and savings accounts. Then you can also do a joint account, right? So if you're married, if you're married, you could have a joint account. And so if one spouse passes, it automatically goes to the other spouse. And there's different types of joint accounts as well. For your IRAs and 401ks, 403bs, all the different retirement accounts, which are qualified accounts, you can name primary and contingent beneficiaries on those accounts. And so you could name as many as you want and designate a percentage. Yeah, you can name even a charitable cause too as part of an IRA. And I named Experience Camps as part of like a beneficiary on my IRA recently for a small percentage.
Nice. I like that. Learning something new. What would you say is some of the most common challenges a young professional faces when it comes to their finances, whether it's like the lack of knowledge or lack of knowledge in a specific part of their finances or just ignorance in general? What are some common challenges that you see come up with amongst your clients?
Yeah, I think the biggest, the most unfortunate thing, and one thing that I'm trying to change is, as someone in this industry, is financial literacy isn't being taught in our schools. And it's like, I went to one of the best private schools in South Florida. I went to University of Florida, which is a new Ivy League school. Go Gators, let's go. And nobody ever talked about like adding beneficiaries to their accounts, or maybe we talked about briefly the difference between a Roth versus a traditional IRA. We talked briefly about like the amortization schedule of like buying a home or compound interest and like compound earnings, but not in the setting of personal finance. It was more of like, hey, just solo investing. And so the resources aren't there and they're not available to everyone. And that's just a fact of life. And so it's super unfortunate, but that's the biggest issue, is a lack of sort of financial literacy. And some families, maybe like you and I, who came from Jewish families, like talk about money more than other families. And some families don't. One of the biggest things is that money isn't the forefront of the conversation And it kind of like falls under that category of sex and politics. Like nobody wants to talk about it. But we should, because if you're at a table with someone who's making 5 times more than you, if I'm at a table with someone making 5 times more than me, I want to know what they're doing because they're doing something either right or they're working 90-hour weeks. And that's just not the lifestyle that I want to live. And so learning from each other is incredibly important in making it the forefront of the conversation. Some common mistakes also is in our 20s is like taking a higher salary in a job that you hate only to just burn out, and taking like a sabbatical at 30 or a trip around the world. Well, you might as well just have got a job that you loved from the start that you can do for the rest of your life. And then keeping up with the Joneses, like it's lifestyle inflation, spending because other people are spent around you are spending, buying a home too early because you think that's like other people around you are buying a home. No, your financial situation is specific to you and everyone is unique and different.
Wow, that was all great. I want to jump back to what you're saying of like, we aren't taught a lot of this in school, if any of this, especially if you're not in any business type classes. Like, I know I was an interior design major, but my minor was business administration. So I did take business finance. I did take certain classes that taught me things like balancing and my assets and all of those things, but no one else in my major had a business administration minor, so none of them know any of those things. So they weren't in those classes. They didn't. We all know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, but we don't know how to balance a checkbook. And it's really messed up because that's the important part. And then the other part that you were saying of having those conversations around money, I want you to talk about money stories, because I think growing up, we all have different money stories, whether we grew up where money wasn't spoken about at all, or when money was something that's embarrassing to speak about, or money is everywhere, so it's okay to spend it all, and everyone has different spending habits as a result, or different ways of looking at their money. So how do you approach people's money stories when it comes to helping them plan for their financial future?
It's a great question. There's actually a test that is available that some financial advisors, financial planners, financial coaches, financial therapists, whatever title you're going by these days, that use called money scripts. And it's really how you view money. I personally don't, but I've done it for myself. But I talk about it with my clients. And so we talk about, how is money talked about in your home? How do you view money in the lens of your parents, right? How do they view money? Well, there might be one of the parents is a compulsive spender and the other one's a compulsive saver. And then what is your first money memory, right? Think about these. Maybe we take a second and think about what is your first money memory?
Like, you're asking me?
Yeah, well, I'm asking the audience.
Okay.
But Jess, if you want to share your first money memory, that would be amazing.
I don't know if my mom would want me to share my first money memory, but I think I relate to, I had one parent who was a spender. Anytime my dad had money come in, he would spend it. And my mom was the responsible adult in between both parents, and she would save as best as she could, and she would pay for necessities, and she made it work the best that she could, but it was also embarrassing to ask for help, is what I learned from a very young age.
Embarrassing to ask for help? Like you were embarrassed to ask for help, or your mom was?
Yeah, like it's embarrassing to ask for financial help if you were in that situation.
And it shouldn't be, right?
I would say, full disclosure to the audience, is like I know that my mom will help me. Like, she will make sure that I don't end up homeless. But it is not comfortable to ask for the help. It's a little bit more comfortable to accept the help that gets offered.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us, or some of us, come from fortunate families and others don't, right? So some of us have a little bit more of a backstop and others don't. And so that views the way you spend and make money decisions and the type of risks that you want to take, right? If you don't have a backstop, you're probably not going to take. You might want that safe, cushy corporate job where you're guaranteed a salary, Or you might want to bet on yourself and just say, hey, like I come from nothing, and the worst thing that happens is I stay here, right? The best thing and then we're only going up from here, right? But your question about how do money stories play into my financial planning process? Well, any decision that anybody makes around money is based on their perception and preconceived experiences around money. And so I, as a professional, need to understand the way, Jess, if you were my client, the way you view money to help you make the best possible decision. And my job isn't to just like, hey, here's what you should do. As a family financial coach, a financial life coach, like my job is to guide you to where you want to be and present all the options and why, and get you to make the decisions that put you in the best situation to get you to where you want to be.
Yeah, and that's what pretty much any coach is. A coach isn't here for you to give you all the advice and tell you exactly what you need to be doing. It's we have experience and we have knowledge, but at the end of the day, like, we're guiding you to be able to make the best decision for yourself. Whether we think it's the best decision for you or not, we're going to set you up for success with whatever it is that you decide to do. And that goes for any aspect of your life. For this conversation in particular, it's around your finances. So Justin isn't going to tell you to go save 50% of your paycheck and put it here and then spend this much on groceries and make sure you're only spending this much on a night out or things along that nature. It's more so of being realistic and having that bigger picture of how are you spending your money? How is this going to dictate your future? And what do you want? Like, what is your game plan for your life? What do you see for yourself? And how can we set you up so that you are successful and that you do achieve those milestones? You can buy a house when you want to, when you are financially able to, not because your friend just bought one and you want to be next door's neighbors, but it's being smart with your money and knowing all the resources that are available to you so that you can make informed decisions along the way.
Exactly. I think we're very caught in the moment, right? Like, what should I be doing right now? Where am I getting dinner? Whatever. When I'm working with my clients and building a financial plan with them, we start with the end in mind. What do you want your life to look like? Where are you going in the next 20 years? What are the things you want to accomplish? If life was cut short, what are the things that you would regret not doing? And then work back as to, all right, what are the things that can get in the way? And what are the foundational steps that we could take to align your money and your savings towards those goals and your ultimate true happiness?
So what is the first step that you take a client through with your process?
And I'm happy to offer a free exploration conversation to anybody who's listening here. But it really is an exploration conversation and diving in deep to what your true priorities are. I work with 25-year-olds. I work with people younger, or I talk to people younger, and I work with people in their 60s. Most people don't know what truly makes them happy and what their true priorities are. They haven't taken the time and the steps to be introspective and think about it. And so in order to provide the best type of advice, we really need to dive into what your priorities are, because if we're building a financial house, if the blueprint's wrong, then why are we going to start building? If we're putting the ladder up against the wrong wall, then we're climbing up the wrong ladder in the wrong place to build that financial house. It's not going to be right, and you're not going to listen to a word I say if we're not honed in on the priorities that are important to you.
That's exactly what I help my clients with in terms of building a healthy foundation. So it is having your priorities in check. It's having your routine in place. It's doing everything that you do on a regular basis that's supporting you to be able to go out and take risks and be adventurous and build the house. You need that solid foundation to build something sturdy on top of. Otherwise, one curveball comes their way and the whole house comes tumbling down. I've made that analogy on several episodes before, so I'm glad that you're bringing it up in terms of finances, because it's all related. And if you guys haven't picked up on that yet, you're going to keep picking up on it until that message is glued into your head of how it's all connected to one another. If you let one thing loose and you're not on top of one part of your life, it's going to ripple out. And it's how you do one thing is how you do everything. It's not just going to be in your finances, it's going to be in your relationships, it's going to be in your career, it's going to be in your health. And it all works in the reverse as well of if you have something dialed in place, you have an awareness around one aspect of your life, it starts to trickle out into the other aspects, and then you are a well-rounded, successful human being. And that's what Justin and I want for you guys. We work with young adults for this reason, because a lot of you guys are very lost out there, and we don't want that for you.
Yeah. 100%. And I would say successful human being, like Jess and I are on a journey to figure that out as well. Maybe I won't lump you into it. I'll just lump myself into it. Like, I don't have it all figured out.
You can lump me into it.
I don't have it all figured out. And that's not the point of this podcast. Success is a journey, and you can define it in any way you want. Whether it's, hey, I woke up and my feet are on the ground and my dog's sitting here next to me. Like, my dog came and cuddled me this morning. Like, that's a successful morning, right? Or I started a business and I got a new coaching client and had an amazing day. That's a successful day. Success is how you define it, and you should spend time thinking about and defining it. And then a lot of people know that they should save, spend less than you earn and save, but people don't really know where to save, and people don't align their savings to what their life and what their successful life looks like.
On that topic, can you break down percentages or rough percentages of where someone's paycheck should go, from bills to saving to travel to investing and all of that stuff? Because I think it's hard in today's world, where it used to be 50% of your paycheck should go to rent, and now that's, with rent being so ridiculous, that's just not the case for a lot of people. But we also know that we should be living below our means, and then that's also easier said than done. So how do you break down where people's finances should, I don't like using the word should, but should go?
Well, should is the right word here, because it's going to be different for every individual, depending on your goals, depending on your income, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're starting a business tomorrow, your paycheck today might look a little different than someone whose main goal is to save for retirement. So a rule of thumb is the 50-30-20 rule. So 50% of your paycheck or your spending should go to needs: housing, utilities, food, groceries, insurance, those fixed expenses, pet bills, right? If that's a fixed expense, like, that should make up your needs bucket. You want to make sure I want to make sure my dog is fed. And so that goes into my needs. 30% should go into the wants. And so that's dining out, entertainment, vacations, travel, shopping, new clothes. That's all the wants category. And then 20% is savings or debt. So funding your emergency fund, which I put out a LinkedIn post 2 or 3 weeks ago about the importance of an emergency fund. The emergency fund, if using this financial house analogy, the emergency fund is like the bricks below the ground floor. That needs to be there and stable and put in correctly before you start building up that financial journey, that financial home. But speaking of home, your home fund, your retirement funds, contributions to education if you have a kid, right? If you have a newborn, you might want to start thinking about college now, because college prices are only going up. And if you want to start a business, thinking about that as well, that would be part of that 20% savings bucket. And this is all after tax income. So another thing that's not being taught in school, along with balancing your checkbook, which I think not a lot of people do anymore, is taxes and how taxes work and our marginal tax rate. And so if you have any questions about that, come to me, and we won't bore you to death with taxes on how to 20 something today, but that's how spending should go.
What's the rule of thumb for your emergency fund? Because I've heard some different answers, so I want to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's very dependent, right? So that goes back to your money stories and your money script. If your first money memory, I have a client whose first money memory was in 08, 09. And that's when the Great Recession happened, and both of their parents got laid off or didn't have jobs. and they had to move home, sell their current home in a depressed market, and were struggling to afford groceries. Like their money script, their money story is going to look a little bit different because they want to make sure that they have a cash cushion that's there to weather any storm. So they're going to lay a couple more bricks below their financial house to make sure that if that South Florida hurricane comes, their house isn't going anywhere. They might add a generator in, glass windows, whatever. We won't go into that analogy too much more. But typically, for someone who's working potentially like a W-2 job, 3 to 6 months worth of expenses is a rule of thumb. So if you're spending $5,000 a month, between $15,000 and $30,000 would be your emergency fund. But right now, you can put that in a high yield savings account as long as it's liquid and accessible to you, that you can take it in case of emergency. It's not going up and down and a kind of volatile with the market.
Yeah, people ask me all the time how I left my corporate job, and I tell them, I was like, well, for one, I didn't have any debt. And for two, I made sure I had 2 years worth of savings to cover my expenses, providing I didn't make any money, like not even a dollar. I also knew I'm not the type of person that would go more than probably a month without seeing any money come in, because I would find a way to make money happen. But it really just comes back to being aware, because how do you know what 3 to 6 months of expenses look like if you don't track any of your expenses? So it's getting a budgeting sheet, or there's apps nowadays that make it super easy for you to log in all your expenses and see where things are going. So you don't even really have to do the work, but you do need to know how much money is coming in and how much money is going out, because otherwise, you have nothing to work with. You don't know what 3 or 6 months of your expenses look like. I know what I spend every single month, so I can multiply that by 12 and know what my year looks like, for the most part, knowing that flat tires happen. And if anyone knows me, I was suffering for like 3 months straight with just a ton of flat tires, or needing a new car battery, which happened last year for me, and just any other hiccups that come up along the way, is having that extra cushion as well. So it's not just it's more of an on average of, if you're to track for the next 3 months, take the average of those 3 months and see what that looks like, and then do it again. But this is not something that you're just like, oh, this month was great, and this month you didn't eat out at all, you didn't drink out at all, you didn't go on any trips, you didn't spend all this extra money that you typically do in a month, because that's not giving you the clear picture that you need to plan accordingly.
I thought you were going to say didn't go on any dates. Those dates, especially in New York City, are expensive. You wonder why I moved back down to South Florida. Still expensive.
Yeah.
The beach is free.
I was going to say dates, but I'm a girl, so I don't pay for the dates.
Yeah, that makes one of us. No, it's such a valuable exercise, because if you don't know how to spend in financial planning, right, it's a model. So it's like a progressive model. If you earn more than you spend on an after-tax basis every single year, you'll never run out of money. But if you don't know what you spend, then how are you supposed to figure that out? And so that's like another foundation, is figuring out what you spend. And I don't like using the B word, but creating a budget. But I actually have, and then aligning what you spend on to like what's truly important to you. I'm a nerd. I do this for a living. I sit down the first Sunday night of every month and I put every data point, every expenditure, whether it's a $2.50 subway ticket, into my Excel spreadsheet. And I have different categories. So I have food, dining out, groceries, transportation, entertainment, miscellaneous, like travel, business expenses, stuff like that. And I've actually created, I call it a what's important spending chart, because budget's a B word, a bad word. It does start with a B, but it's a bad word. And I think it's a worthwhile exercise to figure out what you're spending on a 2 to 3 month basis over the last 2 months, 3 months, multiply that by like by 6 or 4, or however many months you track, and get to 12 months and figure out if over the course of the year you're spending on what's truly important to you. And if rent, having a nice place or having a nice car is not truly important to you, you'd rather spend on experiences with your family, your friends, and your loved ones, then I encourage you to make that change. And I'm happy to share my own personal what's important spending chart with anybody who wants it. They can reach out.
Yeah, I do the same thing for myself, and depending on the client, I'll set them up with a budget sheet. I do call it a budget sheet. I don't think it's a dirty word or a bad word. I think it's being aware of what it is that's where your finances are going, like what's going on with your money. And for me, it's I don't even worry about my credit cards because I don't do it the first Sunday of the month. It's every single Sunday I will put in for that week, what I spent on that week. And then the first of every month, it's what are my fixed expenses for that month. So my rent and my Wi-Fi and my health insurance and my Zoom account, like things like that. But it gives me the breakdown of what I need. So what am I, no matter what, how much am I spending no matter what? And then knowing that I have extra expenses along the way. So I just pay off my credit card whenever I'm like, oh yeah, there's enough there's a lot of money on there. I'll just pay it because it's already logged on my budget sheet. I already have it accounted for. So I don't even think about it of do I have money in that account because I know I have money in that account. And it's being responsible. It's being an adult. So welcome to Adulting 101.
Yeah.
When it comes to investing, why is it important right now? Because everyone tells you all the time, start investing when you're young, like do it now, even though it's hard to do it now because you don't have a ton of money coming in. You're not high up in your job yet. Like you're still trying to get your bearings. You want to save the money for those experiences. But where does investing come into that picture, and why right now? Why when you're young?
The number one, I said this earlier, the number one advantage that we have as a 20-something is time. Time is on our side. And time allows you to make mistakes and allows your money and you to grow. And growth in investing, a synonymous term, is compounding, right? So compounding is the process of kind of your money making money on itself, your money working for you. If you heard the term, I want to make money while I sleep, like that's all compounding, that's all investing. An example, and I'll take my handy dandy financial calculator out, is let's say you have let's say you have $1,000, right? And you earn 10%. All right. Now you have $1,100. And if you earn another 10% the next year, now you have $1,210. So you earn an extra $10 from year 1 to year 2 of 10% compounding. Now, if you compound that over, let's say, 20 years at that 10% rate, the money that you will earn makes more money. So you'll have $6,727, right? And so compounding takes time. And the biggest obstacle is making sure it's uninterrupted compounding or you're adding to it. One of the tactics that's really prominent in investing is dollar cost averaging. You don't think about this, but if you have a 401k and you're contributing every single month, that's what you're doing. So it takes market volatility sort of out of the question because every single paycheck you're making, whether the market's up or down, you're contributing to your 401k. And eventually at the end, you're going to have hopefully a larger nest egg, and it's uninterrupted because you're just doing it on an automatic basis. Investing is important right now because of the time and compounding effort and impact, but also because back to that 50-30-20 rule, you want to build the strong financial habits now of taking 20% of that paycheck and putting it towards your goals and your savings, because if you don't start now, it's only going to kind of compound in a negative direction. Another term is pay yourself first, right? So you want to pay yourself first before you pay the government or anybody else that you sort of owe money to. Pay yourself first by saving towards your goals. And you do that by investing, because unless your goal is to buy a house in the next year or start a business tomorrow, that compound interest is powerful.
Can you break down the decisions someone would make, whether it's a Roth IRA, a traditional IRA, or a 401k, or anything else that is added with numbers and letters that I might not know? I know you mentioned another one earlier in the podcast, but how should someone know which one to put their money into?
So it's complicated. And then another thing that's not taught in school, or another common mistake that people make as a 20-something, is they don't understand their employer benefits. So if you work for a company, you have access to an employer-sponsored plan. Those plans are 401ks, 403bs, 457 plans, and other types of kind of stock options, whatever it might be. So there's a lot of different vehicles to put money into that aren't sponsored by your employers. A 401k plan is sort of like the typical plan that a lot of for-profit organizations have. 403b is a lot of times hospital systems or public entities, or like maybe potentially nonprofit organizations. So that's kind of the difference between those two. But there are also people who have pensions, government pensions. There are people who are in the military who will have access to pensions as well, and they can contribute to that. With your employer-sponsored plan, if you can't do anything else, if you can't save any other money, contribute up until their match. So let's say your company matches 3%. If you put in 3% of your, let's say you make $100,000 a year and you put in 3% into your 401k, your company will match you 3%. That's free money. If you don't do that, then you lose out on that 3% every single year. And whether you're making 0 or 1% on your investments, like, you just lost out on 3% that could be added to your account balance over the years. But there's also different vesting schedules as well. So they kind of, employers handcuff you by saying that you have to stay at a company for a certain amount of years in order for your 401k to vest. I digress. An IRA is an individual retirement account. And so an IRA is something that you contribute in addition to potentially a 401k plan, or separately if you want more control over your investments in your account, or if the plan, or if your company doesn't offer a 401k plan. And there's different limits. So if you make over, I don't have the exact number with me, and nor do I want to quote it, but call it like $200,000+ a year, you might not be able to contribute to an IRA, and then a Roth IRA, you can't contribute if you make over $160,000 a year. So there's different rules and nuances that having a professional at your disposal is super helpful, because that's their job, is to know and understand those nuances, and those kind of contribution limits change. Does that make sense on the 401k versus IRA?
Yeah, that makes sense for me. I'll reiterate, see if it actually does make sense. But your 401k is typically your company, like the people you work for, the company you work at, has this sponsorship. So they set it up for you. They have their financial advisors. I know my second job out of school, you had to work at the company for a year before you could start contributing. Otherwise, so you didn't have one for that first year. And then your Roth IRA is individual. But what I didn't know is that there's a cap for how much you make in a year. So what happens if, let's say because I do have a Roth IRA, let's say I make $175,000 this year. That'd be nice. But what happens then? So can I max that one out and then have a different account, or I can't contribute at all to that one anymore?
Yeah, you're actually not able to contribute to a Roth IRA. You're phased out of the contribution limit if you make more than the allowable amount by the IRS, because it's a benefit, right? So let's take a step back. The difference between a Roth and a traditional. So you can have a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA. You could have a traditional 401k and a Roth 401k. A Roth is, you pay the taxes now. the money grows tax deferred until 59 and a half or later when you take the money out and you take the money tax free. So the contribution amount this year is $7,000 for people who are under 55. If you put in $7,000 now, you pay the taxes on that contribution. It's after tax money now. It grows until retirement, and then you can take the money out tax free. With a traditional 401k or a traditional IRA, let's say you make $100,000 a year, you contribute $7,000 into your traditional IRA or traditional 401k. Your adjusted gross income it goes from $100,000 to $93,000 because you're deferring the tax payment on that until you take the money out. So it grows for, if you're 27, 28 years old, it grows for 40 years, and then you take the money out. Well, you're paying taxes on a larger lump sum, but you're taking kind of either a bet that your tax bracket's going to be lower in the future than it is now. It's all nuance. It's all coordinated actually to the efforts, which is why financial planning is so unique and specific. And then remind me, so restate your initial question.
It was, if I make more money than I'm allowed to have a Roth IRA account, where do I turn to investing? Speaking as an entrepreneur, or even speaking for someone who just has an IRA and it's not through their company?
So entrepreneurs or people who have their own businesses is a little bit different. You can actually set up a solo 401k because you, as a business owner, have a business. And so you can contribute to your own retirement plan and set it up as an employer-sponsored plan or a safe harbor plan. And then your company, which is also you, can match it. There's also SEP IRAs and simple IRAs that are for smaller companies that don't have employer-sponsored 401k plans. You can also make after-tax contributions to an IRA, which means you just pay the taxes now and you don't get the tax deduction, which may be beneficial in your situation, maybe not. And then you can invest in a normal taxable investment account. Think of like a brokerage account at Fidelity, Robinhood, whatever it might be. Basically, I look at a taxable account as a checking or savings account that you invest in securities.
Okay. The second to last question I have for you is about student loans and debt and everything. So I know a lot of people have student loans, or they're going back to school and accruing even more student loans or even more debt. I know one of my friends in particular from college went back to school for his master's this past year, and he has the mentality of, well, I'm already in so much debt. What's a little more? And he's currently in Africa as we speak, just on a trip. What would you tell that person who is up to their eyeballs in debt and are basically not hopeful, they're hopeless in getting out of that debt for their entire life?
They're hopeless about getting out of that debt for their entire life. That's interesting. That's a little bit of a reframe, but I would try to show how debt impacts their life 5 or 20 years down the road. Does being in debt hinder your ability to send your kids to the college that they want to, or buy the house that you ultimately want, or retire early, right? Are you constantly going to be paying off the debt because the debt becomes an expense, and the expense then stays with you for your entire life, including retirement, which means you have to have more of a lump sum or a nest egg or a larger net worth in order to retire. I would also take a step back and try to understand why, like, what is your mindset around money, and how is maybe family biases or your own personal money biases, how does that make up this decision? That being said, I'm all about education, especially in our 20s. I said earlier, your health is your number one asset, but you are the highest returning asset on your balance sheet. You have the biggest ROI. And so no investment or business or stock is going to consistently outperform you and your earning potential. And so as a 20-something, it's important to invest in yourself and do the certifications now while you have the time and there's less people relying on you, or do the things take the leaps into the entrepreneurial world or make the mistakes or the learning experiences now while you're in your 20s to invest down the road, because those learning experiences will only compound in a positive light.
I agree. I mean, it's why I did it. I was like, I'm not married. I don't have any kids. I don't have any pets. I don't have anyone financially obligated to me. So I'm going to make a decision to start my own business and build the life that I want to have for forever and ever right now. And I did it when I was 24. And here I am a couple years later. So it's stressful, but it's worth it. And I think it's easier when you are younger because you do have the flexibility for risk to happen, for mistakes to happen, for you to fail and get back up, because no one else is dependent on you and the money that you're bringing in. It's all, at the end of the day, it is all on you and the life that you want to have for yourself.
I love that. That's perfect. Well said. I mean, and the initial phone calls that you had when you were 24 and just starting your business are compounding now into growth and potential clients, referrals, introductions, podcast guests, whatever it might be. Like, we met in the gym at UF and you have the right work ethic. And now we're talking on a podcast. It's amazing how things that you don't realize 5-10 years ago will compound into opportunities today and in the future.
Yeah. The last thing that I have for you is, do you have any other pieces of advice or words to live by when it comes to someone's finances or career or future or life overall?
Yeah, I might ramble for a little bit and I'm going to be cynical for a moment, but I listened to your dating podcasts, and I've honestly, as a single man in my 20s, I firmly believe that, like, who you marry is one of the most important financial decisions that you're going to make in your life. And here are the cold hard facts, because I did the research and dove in after listening. 40% of first marriages end in divorce in today's world. 20 to 40% of those divorces are caused by money. Basically, 1 in 10 or 10% of marriages end because money issues. And so I encourage you, back to an original conversation piece that we had earlier on this podcast, is bring money to the forefront of the conversation and make sure your money stories, your money scripts, maybe either align or you just understand where your partner is coming from. Having that open and honest communication about money and what money means to you is so powerful, because it helps you make decisions as a team, as a couple, for your financial futures. And have high standards is one thing that I took away from that podcast, and have the money conversations to make sure your views align.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really think about how money plays a role in their relationships with who they're marrying and that person's habits as well. It's like not even just their stories, but how they're spending their money and where they're spending it, how often, and just all of it. It's very important. But thank you, Justin, for coming on How to 20-something.
Of course, I can't end it on that cynical note about divorce and money. So let's bring money to the forefront of the conversation. But I want to reiterate, your health is your number one asset, and you are your highest returning asset. And so invest in yourself, follow your strengths, and do something you love. We're working longer. We're going to work longer than our parents and our grandparents. So learn about yourself in your 20s and take the chances while you're young and responsible for yourself. There's no such thing as wrong or failed decisions. They're just learning experiences.
Yeah. Where can people find you if they have questions, or if they want to follow you, or even if they want to work with you?
Yeah, I'll put my email and LinkedIn in the show notes. I'm posting more financial content on LinkedIn and potentially a newsletter coming out. I might also dabble in my podcast endeavor. But my email is justin.weidenfeld@ironbridgewc.com. I'm offering a free initial exploration conversation for anybody who's listening to this podcast. I'd love to meet you and help you in any way I can. And I'll put my contact information in the show notes. But Jess, it's been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for all you do for the 20-somethings and for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. I know I learned some things, and I told you this before we even started recording, that I was excited to have this conversation because I know I'm well versed with my finances, but there's always things that I need to learn, and I learned a lot from this conversation. So as Justin said, his information will be in the show notes for you guys to access right this instant. But otherwise, this does conclude another episode of How to 20-something. You know the drill by now. If you liked what you heard, please give me a good rating. Share this episode with others, like with a friend or on social media. Tag me, tag Justin when you do. Otherwise, we won't see it. And as always, I cannot wait to be in your headphones again next week with another brand new episode.